Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Sunday, May 26th, and today is day 233. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted. Psalm 51:17 says, "My sacrifice, O God, is a broken spirit. A broken and contrite heart, you, O God, will not despise." I want to read that again. This is a verse from Psalm 51. "My sacrifice, O God, is a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart, you, God, will not despise." I know that I am not the only one that has a broken heart. And I know my heart has felt so broken. And I feel like for people who have lost loved ones that are much, much closer than I don't know how they're surviving right now. I'm currently in Jaffa. Jaffa is the town just south of Tel Aviv in Israel. And I feel like I don't have anything to offer today, except that I am completely on my knees before God. I believe that God is good. I believe that God will hear the cries of the oppressed. He will hear the cries of those who are in pain and suffering, that he hears the cries of all of creation, the cries from Palestine, from the West Bank and Jenin, and the cries of the people of Gaza. And I believe that God hearing the cries of all who are suffering, that this doesn't make the geopolitical situation equivalent, but I also believe that God hears the cries of Israelis and people living in kibbutzes on the Gaza border, and the cries of family members who so desperately are longing for loved ones to be returned home, have been held hostage, and Palestinian mothers whose and fathers and family members whose loved ones are in prison. And for the hostages that are being held in Gaza, for family members who don't know if their loved ones are alive or not, there is just so much grief. And today I spent the day on the border of Gaza in southern Israel. And I was physically and in my heart, I feel like much closer to the heart of everything that's been happening in some ways than I've been. I could literally see places that had been bombed or were being bombed, actively being bombed in Gaza. The day was devastating. It made me feel torn in two. I spent the day with some Israelis also on what they call the Gaza envelope, or what Palestinians would call the Gaza border. It was hot. It was a hot day, and all I could think of was Palestinians who are more than 2 million people who are currently without water. I went to a site on the top of a hill where you could overlook Gaza. And at first, with the naked eye, it looked like there were houses that were still standing, but there were binoculars there, and you could look into the binoculars, and what looked like houses that were standing, much of it was just rubble, or it was just the shells of houses, as far as the eye could see. And the front rows of houses, the next row of houses, as far as the eye could see, all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. Utter, utter devastation. On that same hilltop, you could see smoke rising from places where ordinances or bombs or hostilities were taking place. And then I was with a couple of people, and we went, people that are close to me. I went to the site of the Nova massacre that happened on October 7th. The official number of people who were killed at that location was 364 people and 44 people kidnapped, mostly Israelis, but not only. The scenes of some of those killings were recorded on the video footage via cell phone or cameras that were on Hamas or other militias. And that video that I watched and some of those images are some of the most horrific things I've ever seen. And what is happening in Gaza and what happened on October 7th is evil. And I return to Romans 12 as my guide. Abhor what is evil and cling to what is good. The killings that happened on October 7th were evil. And for those of us who are committed to advocating for an immediate and comprehensive ceasefire, please hear me. We do not have to compromise on calling for an end to the bombing of Gaza. And I fundamentally believe that acknowledging the atrocities committed against Israelis makes our call for an end to the occupation and calling for justice for Palestinians stronger. That both are true. And this is not a false equivalency, and that this is not comparing traumas. What's happening in Gaza, I'm not an expert. Our group has acknowledged that it's an ethnic cleansing. Many has said it's a genocide, and we are committed to the prevention of genocide, but it has got to be brought to an end. What's happening to the people of Gaza is evil. During the hours I spent along the border, today was some of the worst rocket fire from Gaza that's happened in the last several months. Not only was it the most rockets fired in months, but sirens sounded in cities across central Israel, including in Tel Aviv, Herzliya, Petah Tikva, meaning that rockets were fired like the furthest north in Israel than they have been in months. And while I was actually along the border, attacks started to escalate. And so we would be talking, and then you would hear artillery fire. And then we would be talking, and you'd hear like an ordnance go off. And then you might hear the sound of a drone, and this started to escalate. And the discussion was just between a member of the kibbutz and three of us. It was a very private discussion. And as I was taking notes, I would just interrupt every time I heard a bomb go off, or every time I heard artillery fire or helicopter munition, or on an occasion, the Iron Dome would go off. Israel has a red coat alert system in addition to the sirens that sound in the cities. And you on your phone can get these red alerts. And homes on the Gaza envelope actually have safe rooms for when rocket fire begins. But this kibbutz is so close to the Gaza border that from the time you get an alarm at the kibbutz to when like a rocket might detonate is only 15 seconds. And I've often written about rocket attacks, and I've often talked about how, the number of injuries or deaths is very, very low. And part of the reason why that is because of these alert systems, the sophisticated military defense system, the Iron Dome, and other technology. And part of the reason is these safe rooms. And also because of how well-versed the community is in responding, and how normalized the community is in terms of responding to security threats, which is part of what made October 7th so unbelievable. It was unbelievable because there were all these systems that just failed that day in so many ways. And today we heard in great detail in 2 or 3 different areas about what happened and what failed, and how systematic the attacks were. We met with people who lost many, many people they knew, and sometimes family members, and sometimes they know many people who are still being held hostage. And while we were hearing stories, munitions would go off. And, that was an unaccustomed experience. I've heard that sound before, but most of the time in the distance. And I kept thinking about our friends in Gaza who've been living under those sounds for 233 days. Children growing up with the trauma of not having a safe place or a secure place to sleep. The Hamas attacks were horrific, and the communities affected by them are still traumatized. And they talk about, how they can't talk about post-traumatic stress system, and attacks in Gaza are still happening every day. And the majority of community members in these kibbutzes have not moved back. And each and every day, Palestinians in Gaza have no place to go and can't get away from being under the bombing. What's happening in Gaza is indescribable and inhuman. And today I had the opportunity to share with some of these Israelis about what I've seen in Gaza. They'd asked if I'd been in there, and I was able to tell them how wonderful the people are. And how civilians in Gaza, one of the things I heard the last time I was there was that how much the people there did not support the control of Hamas. And I was able to talk to them about what I've seen and directly experienced. And I felt like they were able to listen. And I was able to tell them those things after the trauma they've experienced. I think that they were at least gracious in hearing what I had to say. And they talked about how they used to go to Gaza to shop, but how that's changed so much since the second Intifada, and how much things have changed over the last decades. And I don't have any answers, except to say that what's happening right now has got to stop. The bombing, the killing, the rocket fire, the ground invasion, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, where so many people's daily needs are not being met. And I think we also just have to be really honest that the atrocities that happened on October 7th were just that. They were atrocities. They were really horrific. I heard about them in great detail today. And, I'd watched that film before, but I saw rooms today that were just filled with too many bullet holes to count. And I heard stories of horror that make it hard to sleep at night. And I hate the designation terrorist because it's so politicized, and every side of this conflict is the epitome of using someone's pain for political gain. And there's not a doubt in my mind, that when Israelis drop bombs on people in Gaza, it provokes terror. And that when militants and when Hamas was in these communities and in people's homes, it provokes terror. And in that, I'm grateful to have a faith and to be reminded that we're not alone. When I send prayers to my friends in Gaza, I often send them prayers from the Psalms. I will lie down and sleep in peace, for you alone, O Lord, make me dwell in safety. That's a prayer I pray often. And so some of the Psalms that I think are an encouragement and a reminder that God is with us and carries our burdens are Psalm 34:18. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Psalm 147:3, that God heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. And today, after a couple of hours of hearing military sounds and, detonations that we're not accustomed to hearing, today at 1:19 p.m., there was a loudspeaker announcement that there was going to be an incoming attack. And we had about 15 seconds and we were nowhere near a safe room or a bomb shelter. And the person we were with just said, run or, get down on the ground. And so we ran to the side of the next building and scrambled to throw ourselves down on the bushes. And I don't even know who said what. And they said, lay your hands over your head. And we all kind of were a bit on top of each other, somewhat, in the bushes. And I don't know if the sound of the explosion that we heard was before or after we hit the ground, because everything's happened so fast. It was hard to say. And we laid there for, I don't know if it was a minute or two or 30 seconds or what, until someone said that it was safe to get up. And then we were asked if we were okay. And then we just kept walking and talking. And, this kind of seems to be a regular experience. And we found out later that a rocket from Gaza had hit a car in a kibbutz that was 2 kilometers away, and that no one was hurt. And that was just kind of one glimpse of a bit of what we experienced today. And we talked about this at Christ at the Checkpoint, about what it means to bear witness, to give evidence and testimony to the things that we've seen and to the things that have happened. And I think it was important to share with you some of the things that we saw. The things that we saw overlooking the hilltops, looking into Gaza, and the things that we saw with Israelis who are living in the southern part of Israel, who are traumatized. And I just wanted to close with the words of the woman that we were with today, because after all of that, and after her telling about how so many members of her community had been killed and how there's still 5 members of that community that are still being held hostage, she was talking about the future between Israelis and Palestinians. And she said of people in Gaza, or Palestinians in general, she said, I don't like them very much. She said, and I know that they've tried lots of different things. And she was talking about how Israelis keep trying through military might. And she said, I know we've tried lots of different things. She said, but what we're doing now, it just hasn't worked. And she said, I know in all of my heart. And she said, I know it's very hard. But she said, if we want peace, they have to have peace. And if they want peace, we have to have peace. And so if there's ever going to be a future of peace, our futures are linked to one another. And I just thought it was so courageous of her to have that perspective. Standing there literally 10 feet away from this utterly destroyed place that had been attacked, where so many people had been killed. And that's that quote from Mother Teresa I've shared before. The reason that we do not have peace is because we've forgotten that we belong to one another. I first heard that at Christ at the Checkpoint in 2010. Lynn Hybels shared that quote. And so I'll close today with Lamentations 3:22 and 23. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning, for great is his faithfulness. So may we be reminded of that truth as we continue to work towards peace, comprehensive ceasefire. And may we be reminded that for peace to come, there has to be peace, that our peace, the peace of the future, our future is inextricably linked to one another.